Hi there, and thank you for tuning in. Normally when I do lens reviews, I do those reviews right after I've bought the lens. I really want to understand what can this lens do, how good is it. With this lens, the 16-35, the situation is a little bit different. I've actually owned this lens for 8 months. This is October 2021. And this lens here has been with me for around 8 months. And I've shot more than 4,000 shots with it. So I know the ins and outs of this lens, and that's why this review will be a little bit different. I will focus less on the technical sides and more on actually showing you some images that I've taken with this lens. So let's dive right into it. So here it is, the 16-35. It comes with a lens hood, and it is not a very long lens hood because the angle of view is very wide. So obviously they've had to make it very short towards the sides and not so short in the top. I must admit that I seldom use the lens hood. I have a filter that sits on this camera most of the time. It's an ND filter, and it takes 72mm filters, which is quite large. And this is a variable filter because then I can turn it to minimum. I can then focus, and then I can turn it to maximum if that is to my liking. That way around I don't have to take the filter off to focus and put it on back again. So I like the variable ND filter. But 72mm, that is quite a lot, and it's quite an expensive filter. So factor in prices for filters if you're planning to use filters with this lens. You will notice the gold ring here, meaning it's weather sealed, and that is quite nice. I will though advise you to make sure that you have just an UV filter or some filter that doesn't do anything sitting on your lens, because listen to this. Can you hear this sound? This is what happens when you bring the lens to a beach and you don't have a filter on top here. Then sand gets into the construction here. I think it gets in here between these moving parts, and that is not good. You can hear I simply can't remove that without doing something dramatic to the lens. So make sure you have a filter sitting there. The lens itself comes with a constant aperture of f4. It has vibration reduction, as you can see here, and it allows you to have both manual focus and automated focus here, and you have vibration reduction that you can turn on or off like this. There's a few things here that I really don't like about this lens. One thing is that if you look at the distance scale here, and I then I can move the focus ring a little bit back and forth without the distance scale moving, right? And that's because there's a little play here, and I don't really like that. I like that it grabs immediately. But apparently that's the way it is. Also, you will notice there's no depth of field indicator. That would have been nice if you ask me, especially if you're focusing manually and try to find the hyperfocal distance. I find that very useful. Maybe not a biggie, but be aware there's no depth of field indicator. Otherwise, the lens, as you saw, moves from 16-35mm, and I hope your lens doesn't say like this. But there's no moving beyond the front of the lens, and hence you can have filters as I just showed you. The lens comes with no aperture ring as we know it from the G series lenses. You can still change the aperture here by moving a little lever. The lens is 680 grams, which is actually quite okay, and it comes well balanced. So sitting on my Nikon D4, it makes a very good package, well balanced. So in terms of the weight and the size, I have really no complaints. I think it's a good solution. There is a rubber gasket here as part of the weather sealing, and otherwise it is very much an F-mount as we know them from the G-series lenses. It comes with 9 blades. They are all rounded, and the minimum focus distance is 29 centimeters, which is quite close to the lens, but that's quite common for wide lenses, that you can get really close to your subject. Other than the mount here, it's all plastic, but it feels actually quite okay. The quality here, I think it will last. My only quality issue is this focus ring, where I'm a little bit disappointed with the play that there is here. That they could have made better, if you ask me. So here it is, mounted on my Nikon D750. So if you're curious what that looks like, this is it. See, here I'm testing the autofocus. I think it works okay. It's fast. It's silent. I also will mention that the focus throw is relatively short. I do like some of the older lenses where you have a much longer throw, but clearly Nikon has made this lens to be used with primarily autofocus. Now, if I was to test this lens really properly in terms of sharpness and contrast, I would need to test it at 16mm, 35mm, and somewhere in between. I had to test it in the center, in the corner, and for each of those I would have to do that both wide open and stop down a bit. And in the best of worlds, I will have to do that with different distances to the subject and also different cameras. So that would be quite a test, right? So I could take you through the MTF charts and convince you that this is an excellent lens when it comes to contrast, and also center sharpness is very good, whereas when we get to the corners it looks a little bit worse. But what I would much rather do is to show you images taken with this lens, because I owned it now for 8 months, taken over 4,000 images, and I have a pretty good idea about what it can do. I shoot both ICM images, traditional landscapes, as you see here. I must say that no matter how I try to use it, with an ND filter, without filters, wide, narrow, I think this is an absolutely wonderful lens. And the images that comes out of it are, as far as I can see, absolutely great. Of course, there may be an issue when you shoot very wide open, that it has problems with sharpness in the corners, but I have never had a customer or a client come up to me and say, hey, I think the corners there, they look a little bit soft. That has never happened. So with those words, I will just say that image quality, color rendition, sharpness, contrast, this is an amazing lens, if you ask me. As you can see here, flare and ghosting is controlled pretty well, and actually to such a degree that if you're a videographer, you may not want to use this lens for this reason. Pretty impressive, if you ask me. Of course not perfect, but pretty impressive. There is a little bit of focus breathing, but not much, and certainly not much relative to other wide lenses I have tested, and I have not been able to find any focus shift. I do admit that distortion and vignetting on this lens is pretty bad. You can see here I remove the profile correction, and you can see especially on the little picture up here how dark it gets in the corners, and the lines here in my bathroom are certainly curved. But it is only one click away in Lightroom, and then you have fixed the issue. Of course, if you are a architecture photographer or real estate photographer, you should be aware of this, and maybe you don't want to accept this, but I think for most of us, we can just click this little check mark here in Lightroom and all is good. I've really tried my best to find some aberrations and failed to do so, I must report. Maybe there is a little bit here to the left at f4. A tiny, 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 tiny bit of aberrations, but it ain't much. It really is impressive. My party trick normally in these cases is a little piece of tinfoil here. And as you can see, not anything here that color-wise looks funny inside. Really, really impressive. Not a single purple, green, anything. Only if I shot extremely wide and went very close up, you can see here in the center, there's a little bit of yellow here to the left of the dollar bill that I can remove by checking and unchecking the mark here. And here even worse, bottom left, if you see the color, the purple color here and the yellow here, I can remove that again. So I could produce some, but it was very, very difficult, and only in the corners was it significant, and I could remove that just by clicking a button here in Lightroom. So I think aberrations really well controlled. I must admit that I'm not a big fan of Sunstars from rounded blades. Give me straight blades and I'll happily sacrifice the bokeh. But this one comes with rounded blades. Not much I can do about that. I really don't like these Sunstars. Personal preference, that's just my opinion. I cannot imagine anyone would buy this lens because of its bokeh, but if you do, then what it produces here to me looks okay. And if I just take a look at 16mm, how it does there, you can see here at f4 it renders the background okay, I think. At f7.1 there isn't that much blur as you would expect, but I think this is approved. And as I said, I don't think anyone buys this lens because of its bokeh. So to conclude on this lens, I think it is absolutely a wonderful lens. If I was to say it in only one sentence, it produces some amazing images. It is a rather expensive lens if you ask me. I think I paid 730 euros for it new. You can have it today for around 450 euros. I saw it at mpb.com, not sponsored, but that's probably around the price level if you want a good copy. And for that price, I think you get a really, really good lens. I think Nikon has been really smart about this lens. They're giving us a lens that can't go very wide, only at f4, constant aperture though, but still can't go super wide. But they have compensated by giving us vibration reduction, right? And that is really smart because that way you get the best of both worlds, because you still get the ability to gather a lot of light using time instead of going very wide. And you avoid all the optical issues you typically see when you go very, very open on a lens, right? When you open up the aperture, that's when all the issues happen. I've tested so many lenses and I know this. Lenses that can go very wide, they always have problems in the corners when you go very wide. As soon as you stop down, many of the issues disappear. So by actually stopping down the lens by design, Nikon has avoided a lot of issues. I'm not saying it's a perfect lens, but they have for sure avoided a lot of issues. Maybe being a little bit old-fashioned, what I would like to see, because I've probably paid a fair price for having autofocus, right? And I don't really need autofocus on a lens where I use it primarily for landscape, right? So Nikon, if you're listening, I would like to have a lens next time that maybe the autofocus is gone and then the manual focus is built a little bit better without this play, as you see here. And I would also like to have a longer throw. I think that would be much more useful for me. And also please add the aperture scale back in so we can, those of us who try to maximize or optimize the hyperfocal distance, we have something to work with. That would be nice. I know I'm maybe a little bit old-fashioned this way, and don't get me wrong, I fully enjoy the autofocus. I'm as lazy as anyone else, but I think on a lens made primarily for architecture and landscapes, I think I could do without the autofocus and maybe a slightly reduced price. Another thing I would ask Nikon to do is to think about whether you could give us straight blades. I think the Sunstars with this lens actually look not very beautiful. Old straight blades from vintage lenses, that's much more attractive if you ask me. If you plan to use this for architecture or real estate or something where it's very important that a straight line is straight, you may want to consider carefully if this is the lens for you, because it has a lot of barrel distortion. As I said in the video, I fixed that in post just by checking a little check mark in Lightroom. But there are disadvantages to doing that, and if you're if you're an architecture photographer, you probably know this better than me. But know this lens comes with significant barrel distortion. Other than that, the color rendition is as we know it from Nikon. So if you like Nikon, I don't think there's any change there for you. You will like that. It is weather sealed. I showed you that I have unfortunately gotten some sand into my construction, but it is weather sealed. So if you apply filters, I think the lens will work also in very tough conditions like beaches and windy weather and whatnot. So all in all, I'm a happy camper. I can highly recommend this lens, but of course take into consideration the pros and cons. I will end the video here with a list so you can study that in more detail. I will also put that in the description. As always, thank you for watching. Take care. Bye bye.